I could only claim to have had one sighting of them, a physical sighting, that being the original one in '93. But I can tell you too that I've spoke about it here and there. I don't speak about it a lot, but I about 2.5 years ago during COVID, I had probably the most amazing sighting, and only my second in 28 years. So I it's more than just a single sighting for me. I can say that, but it took a hell of a long time for that second one. And but that second was, well, that's a good story in and of itself. But why don't we just get this rolling and let me know when we're taping, and we'll just, my wife will tell you I got no problem talking. So thank you. It's great to be with you again, Daniel. It's been a long time. Gosh, several years back, when I spoke at one of your conferences, and now it's good to see you, and to be able to catch up on a few things that have been going on in my life. Uh, I have to start with pointing out the fact that I've spent my at least 60 of my years living in the Pacific Northwest, mainly the state of Oregon. And you don't live in the Pacific Northwest without having, heard of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. It's kind of part of the culture, I suppose. But for me, I had written it off as some sort of urban legend or just a campfire tale to keep kids in line or what have you. Having been a hunter and fisherman, hiker, mountain climbing, been out and spent a lot of time both on land and in the water, and I would have thought I would have seen something in all those years. But at this time of my life, when I got had my epiphany, if you will, I was 34 years old. I was a combat engineer in the Oregon Army National Guard. And for those of you who may not be aware, a lot of what combat engineering does is it includes explosives. In many cases, very large explosives. And so on April 3rd of 1993, I was with my unit, the 1249th Combat Engineers, and we had gone out into the Oregon Coast Range, not far from the coastal town of Seaside, Oregon, where we were going to practice our trade, if you will. We had three rock quarries on private timberland that we had obtained access to. And just you can imagine, based on the activity we're involved in, we had considerable security in the area to make sure that civilians didn't wander into the area. We had blasted at two of the three sites, moved on to the third, which was a cratering charge, about 250 pounds of ammonium nitrate that we'd been soaking in diesel fuel for a few hours. We got that in the ground, put in the blasting caps, the timing fuse, and we lit the fuses, giving us roughly 15 minutes maybe to get in our vehicles and reach a safe area where we would await the explosion and then go back and check our work, see how we did. Standard SOP, right? So on that particular day, it was probably, I want to say, about 3 in the afternoon. It was a fairly decent day, being April in the Coast Range. When we boarded our vehicles after having lit the fuse, I was a passenger behind the driver in the second vehicle. We had 5 vehicles in all. And as we descended down the hill on this windy logging road to get ourselves some distance between the explosion and ourselves, I had the opportunity to look about the countryside. Like I said, it was a nice day. I had the window open, and so I'm looking for deer and elk. I had hunted that particular hunting unit, the Saddle Mountain unit, for years, and so it was just natural for me to, since I didn't have to focus on driving down this windy road, to just kind of glance about the countryside. But we rounded a corner. So I recall just a wide sweeping corner. As we did, the second blast site came into view. Now, this was a blast site, a rock quarry, if you will, that we had detonated a sizable explosion, mostly C4 plastic explosives at that one, as I recall, maybe an hour or so earlier. And as the quarry came into my view, I noticed three very distinct, very dark figures standing right out in the open in the middle of this gravel quarry, and something wasn't right. My first thought was, "What the hell are those people doing down there?" And I say that because we weren't allowed to wander off onesie twosie, or we had what we call 100% accountability for safety reasons. Everybody had to be within an eyesight of the unit. So for having to have a couple, two or three individuals off on their own just did not make sense. And my concern was that they may have been civilians that somehow got through our security perimeter. But it took me only a couple seconds to realize that what I was looking at were not human. And by that, I mean, they were too big. They were, like I said, they were black from head to foot, didn't show any signs of clothing at all. The profile they showed was not human. And by that, I mean that it was the arms that really struck me initially. The arms were way too long for humans, where our hands rest pretty much right about our hips. These arms extended all the way down to their knees. And like I said, there were three of them. And so just to give your audience an idea how it appeared to me, there was the largest of the three. I estimated at least 8 to 9 feet in height. It was a huge individual. That one stood there just almost like a statue. I didn't detect any movement from it per se, but the two that flanked it on its right and left were engaged in this unusual activity. They were rocking to their left and to their right, shifting weight from one foot to the other, and in the process, these long pendulous arms were swinging down all the way at their knees. And so, I mean, I could go on. I mean, the size was not human. The shape was not human. These things were built like bodybuilders, all three of them. They're barrel chested, broad shoulders, a tapered waist. But the arms, and I'd have to say the legs too, just seem disproportionately long compared to a human torso. But anyway, I stood there, or sat there, I should say, stunned at what I was looking at. I watched them for a pretty decent period of time. The entire time they were doing this rocking side to side activity, at least two of them. And I watched them, I would estimate about 25 seconds, which when it comes to Bigfoot sightings, as you know, Daniel, it's a pretty good long view. And again, they were doing this Watusi or whatever you want to call it. They were just swinging side to side, and then 25 seconds elapsed. We turned the corner. I lost sight of them, and I just slumped back into my seat and tried to wrap my head around what I just saw. It's a weird feeling to have something like that, something that's not supposed to be, suddenly be. I can't unsee it, and I make no apologies for it. In fact, I feel quite fortunate for having had that sighting, that encounter.
Yeah, just curious.
Sure.
Yeah, just curious. Did any of the other soldiers witness this, or was it just you by any chance?
So that's a good question. And at the time, I being a passenger sitting behind the driver, there were two individuals sitting up front in the Humvee, and I know they didn't see it. I was the only passenger sitting back directly behind the driver. And so at the time, I assumed that I was the only one that had seen him. And we were getting pretty close to that safety area where we were going to get out of our vehicles and wait for that impending explosion. And when we did get down there, I took the opportunity to jog back in the direction we had just come from. It was my hope that I could stay within sight of the unit and still get far enough away to where I could get another view of them. And that was my objective, as the rest of the other three trucks were coming in behind us. But I went as far as I could, and there was this stupid berm, just a slight hill that was blocking my direct view of the quarry, and it was frustrating. But while I was standing there looking off in the distance, I'm sure I was on my tiptoes with my hand up to my forehead, as you can probably picture, trying to look off in the distance to see if I could get another view of them. Somebody called out my name. I heard somebody to my right yell, "Hey, Neiss." Okay, so I look to my right, and it's Sergeant Martin, and he's walking my directions, and I said, "Yeah, what's up?" And he said, "Just what are you looking at?" And of course, I said nothing, and he proceeded to come up to where I was at, and the last of the trucks were rolling in behind us, and he came right up to where I was at, and looked me right in the eyes and said, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at that second blast site." Well, you can imagine, I'm like, "Oh, dear God, please say what I hope you're going to say." But, being the brave guy I was, I said, "I don't know, Jeff, what did you see?" And I remember he took a drag off his cigarette, and he looked over his shoulder to the left and over to the right, and he made sure nobody else was within earshot. And he exhaled and just said, "I saw three dark, huge Bigfoot, I think." And of course, upon hearing that, I very extended. I said, "Yeah, yeah, I saw him too. I saw him too." And it was great for me, not that I had any questions about what I had seen, and frankly, without his corroboration, it wouldn't have changed anything necessarily. I can't unsee what I saw, but it was kind of cool to know somebody else had shared that experience with me. So that's an answer to your question. Yes, at that point, I knew that I wasn't alone in what I had seen. As I stated at the beginning, I was with at that time, I was in the Army National Guard. Now, I finished up my 20 years of service with a little over 15 years of active duty. But I started out in the National Guard, and so being a traditional guardsman, as you probably are aware, we all have day jobs, right? So we get together one weekend out of the month to do our training, and it would be early May before we got back together to do some more training, that I would come to find out that two more soldiers had come forward at that drill, as we called them. Two more soldiers came forward and admitted to seeing exactly what Sergeant Martin, Jeff Martin, and I had seen. So it's a total of four eyewitnesses, and that's just the ones we know of. I mean, I have to think that if there were four eyewitnesses and there were five vehicles full of troops, that there probably were more eyewitnesses, but four that we knew of coming forth, which makes that sighting rather unique in and of itself, because multiple eyewitnesses account for a small portion of the sightings, encounters made. Multiple animals are even more rare, as you know. Usually it's a single individual. And then, of course, we got to think about the activity that we were engaged in that day. We were blowing up the woods, man. We were putting up mushroom clouds like 2,000 feet in the air, blowing up hundreds of pounds of ammonium nitrate or plastic explosive, creating a small earthquake in the process, right? So those three things combined make it a very unique sighting, and it's kind of stood the test of time over the years. It's been 32 years now, and I've been researching ever since.
Yeah, that's very awesome. Yeah, because now from what I understand, apart from this, a lot of your research consisted of cruising the shorelines of the Pacific Northwest. If you want to collaborate a little bit on that, or what led into all that.
Well, I tend to be one of these researchers that thinks outside the box. There's a lot of us doing the same things repeatedly, and you know what they say about people doing the same thing over and over and getting the same result, right? So nobody's got it right yet, and so I try to use some more I would call unconventional modes of research. Of course, I incorporate my hunting skills, which I've honed over many decades. Also, some just standard research techniques, if you will. But I do try to think outside the box. And one of the things I have looked into is researching from a maritime platform. In 2016, late September, I put together a very unique expedition. We dubbed it Operation Sea Monkey. You may have heard of it. We raised some money and put together a team. It was a real who's who. I think, I'd had very little time to put it together, but I was fortunate enough to get names such as Ron Moorhead, Gunnar Monson with Sasquatch Coffee. We had Thomas Steenberg, a renowned author and researcher from British Columbia, and Tom Seawood, some others that we had total of 6 team members and 8 total, including 2 videographers, cameramen that we had brought with us as well. And what we did was to charter a 50-foot trawler out of Campbell River on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. What we had learned is the Native Americans north of there inhabited some islands known as the Broughton Archipelago. And this is a cluster of nearly 100 small islands. They're forested islands, very unique, rocky forested islands, some very small. Others, there's a few that are pretty good size, but literally, the archipelago is so thick with islands in the northern stretch along that strait, that western strait there, that some claim that a good swimmer and even some of the wildlife could literally swim from the mainland of British Columbia through the islands, obviously resting between, and quite possibly reach Vancouver Island. And so we thought, what better place to go to than these uninhabited islands that were once inhabited by the Kwakwaka'wakw tribe hundreds of years ago. And the objective was, in this case, a short-term expedition just to basically look at the feasibility of doing a much longer one being perhaps 3 months in length. At the time, I owned a coastal cruising yacht, about 40-foot yacht that I had lived on for several years. And my thought was, when I retire from the Army, to take it up to cruise it up to British Columbia and spend an entire summer searching the coastlines, both the mainland and the island, but those islands in between specifically. In this case, we only had about a week to do this exploratory expedition, again, just to look at the feasibility of getting up there and all the logistics that it would involve to go up there on a longer term. So what we did is every evening we traveled probably 70 miles north of Campbell River through the Johnson Straits, and we had two inflatable Zodiacs that we could use to leave the quote unquote mothership, if you will. And every day we would visit a different island. We would anchor offshore, take the Zodiacs to the beach, look for areas where we thought they may access the beaches to collect clams, shellfish, cockles, mussels, and whatnot, which had just come into season about late September, early October. And so we would take shifts every night, throughout the night, using some very expensive infrared camera, and watch the shoreline, because the stories we had heard from the natives were they would access the beaches at night and dig these clams up. So I would take maybe midnight to 2 a.m. and wake up Ron Moorhead. He would do 2 to 4. He'd wake up, Thomas Steenberg. He'd do 4 to 6, and we'd do this around the clock. And during the day, we'd go ashore looking for tracks, any sort of evidence we could find. We would set up game cameras. I carried a kit of 4 seismic ground sensors that would trigger if they were if they detected any vibration in the ground, and send a signal back to the trawler that we were on. So it was a great exercise. We spent I think a total of 6 days investigating 5 different islands. We had a great time, a lot of work, and we came away believing that we can, in the future, do a much longer expedition up there. I should say the actual original concept came from Peter Byrne. I'm sure most of your listeners probably recognize him as one of the pioneer researchers in the Bigfoot field.
Yeah, I'm familiar with him.
Yeah, Peter passed away about 2 years ago this month, at the age of, well, he was just a couple weeks shy of 98 years old. But Peter lived on the coast in Oregon, in a town of Pacific City, and he came up with this idea of us going out in a large inflatable out into the ocean from an estuary of the Salmon River, just north of Lincoln City and south of Pacific City, where he lived. And so he contracted this guy that had this it must have been about a 25-foot inflatable with a center console, and we all jumped in at the docks in the river, and we literally went straight out of the mouth of the river into the ocean, and we cruised several miles north and south, looking at that time for different avenues of ingress should Bigfoot want to access the coast. And we found a number of places that were completely uninhabited, absolutely wild accesses where we could see trails that would come down to the beach, game trails. So it's kind of where I stole the idea, because that was done, I think, a couple of years before that. But anyway, so yeah, I think, we've got to, as researchers, think outside the box, and like I say, nobody's got it right yet, so why not? But
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
That's awesome. Oh no, I'm sorry. Nah, I'm listening and everything. I was just away from the phone.
That's all right. That's all right. Go ahead. Yeah.
So yeah, now this is interesting because you're talking about when we experiment and try these different techniques, like you said, thinking outside the box. I mean, over the years, I've had my share of receiving criticism over what I've done, even in recent times with my group when we go out camping and we go out exploring. People see the video footage. One of the couple that comes with me, one of my team members, David and Melissa Lester. David, he's also retired from the Army and also from the local one of the local police departments here. He's got two. He's got two careers that he's retired from. He's currently around 65 years old, and and Dave and Melissa, they have a German Shepherd. I remember when they first started bringing her name's Luna, by the way, and she's 2 years old. We love having her out there. It's interesting because we've had her in several different locations out there, and just to watch her become alert to what's out there, because a lot of it's new to her, but she's she's becoming accustomed. She's getting really used to what's being out there with us, and she does a great job. And so one of the criticism remarks I got from one individual, and I never thought I would get this from anybody, but I did. And it's like, yeah, you guys are going out there with a group of people, and you got a dog with you. You're not going to find nothing with a dog. I was like, what is this? I mean, especially, and they go on to say like, yeah, there's no hunting done with dogs. From where I'm originally from, yes, and even down here on the East Coast in the South, hunters, there's bear hunters. They run their dogs for bear hunters. Up north, you can run dogs for deer. Unlike you can't do that here in
Oh
Virginia.
yeah, they use them in Oregon for hunting down cougar, all kinds of things. But I've heard
Right.
that argument. I've heard that argument before, and it seems to me that more times than not that dogs refuse to trail these things, and um, I that's just my experience that there seems to be perhaps a love-hate relationship between canines and the Sasquatch or Bigfoot. It may go back just to the fact that in more primal times that they were direct competitors for the same resources, the same game that they would being carnivores both that they would have to compete with each other. I don't know. I don't know, Daniel. That's a good question. What's been your experience?
Well, it's just ever since we've had Luna with us, it just mainly sitting around the base camp is when we more or less pay attention to her because where our base camp is, of course we're surrounded by the woods, but our base camp where we've been camping lately, it is on the edge of an open field. Of course, the field's surrounded by the national forest, all the woods and everything. But of course, canines they pick up things and they sense things that we don't always sense. And like a lot of times, we do try to pay attention to her, even though when we're sitting around the base camp, enjoying the campfire or just shooting shit, whatever it may be, you know, you either she stops and looks in a certain direction, or she might start have this low little growl, like she's growling at something. Like what the heck she's picking up on,
Well,
it gives us
that's a
something to pay
good
attention
point.
to. Yeah, it's interesting.
Well,
It's fun.
dogs are not only very naturally intuitive, but their senses are far more attuned, a lot more, I should say, acute than ours. For instance, dogs can hear humans hear between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz, generally speaking, with few exceptions. Dogs can hear as low as 15 hertz and as high as 35 hertz. So, for instance, when you blow a dog whistle, it just sounds like, nothing, like we're blowing air. But dogs hear that because it produces a very high pitched whistle above that 20,000 hertz range. So, it's great to have a companion with you that has the ability to detect things that are outside of our range of hearing as well. A dog can hear. Dogs can hear 10 times better than humans. So, and they, I take it back. No, dogs, dogs can hear ranges above and below human hearing, but at the same time, they can smell. Their smell detection is 10 times that of a human. So imagine whatever you smell, they can smell it 10 times farther away. So it just makes sense, especially I would say perhaps in a camp setting, to have them along just for, as a sentry, or as an animal that's going to be able to alert you should anything happen that you may or may not be aware of. So I don't have a problem with that. I'm just thinking in the field when you're on the move tracking. Personally, I wouldn't take a dog in the field, and by that I mean when you're trekking around, but around camp, why not? But that's just my 2 cents.
Right. I mean, yeah, like I said, it's fun having her there. She's a pleasant. She's a pleasure to have there. Most definitely, she is. She's a really well behaved dog, and a lot of that comes from David's training. David and Melissa. David, when he was in the army, that was part of his assignment. He was training canines in the army. So,
Oh, right on.
yeah, she was well behaved. She is a well behaved dog. I mean, of course, we've got to keep a leash and everything because I mean, in this particular video, there's coyotes, there's tons of deer. I mean, at nighttime when we're sitting around the camp, we're observing with our night vision or our thermal flares. Yeah, we're picking up deer and everything all surrounding, the camp area. So, and then plus we got bobcats around. I know there's bobcats around this particular area. I got one on my trail camera that was out there, and
Oh, yeah.
we have reason to believe, even though they deny it here on the East Coast, there's mountain lions here. But your game departments and your authorities will deny them. But there's so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of eyewitnesses, especially in the area we're focusing in right now. This area, it's in Virginia, but it's not far from the West Virginia line. But yeah, there's many eyewitnesses accounts of mountain lions in this area, and
Yeah,
so
we get that here.
For.
We get that here as well in Arkansas. I have literally seen photographs that have been taken on game cameras, and they've been brought to the attention of authorities. And like you say, Fish and Game, they will deny that. I think for what they're really kind of hinging on is that there was not an established breeding population of them, but they are aware that. In fact, there was an article a couple of months back in the Newton County Times where the author said that in 25 years that there have been 23 established, in other words, officially recognized sightings of cougar or mountain lion in Arkansas. So almost one a year, and those are the ones that they say, yeah, we're okay. We can't deny it. We've got the evidence, but I think their point is that there may be some single individuals, but not a very large breeding population that would necessarily have them be officially established as an indigenous species in the area. But they're out there, I guarantee. And of course, where I lived in Oregon, they were everywhere. So, but anyway,
yeah, that's
Daniel,
interesting.
can I
Yeah,
ask
because
you?
out in the Pacific Northwest, yeah, they're widely acknowledged out there. And then, of course, if you drop all the way down to the southeast coast here down in Florida, you got what they title the Florida panther, which is well acknowledged down there. And so
Right.
you have them down south, you have them out west. But my thing is, it puzzles me why they are going to deny them here on the East Coast. And the biggest thing I can come up with, my conclusion is that they don't want the public to know because it would cause or create the fear factor. If
Well, well, Daniel, you probably just hit the nail on the head when it comes to Bigfoot as well. I think for the very same reasons that they do not want to acknowledge what they probably already are aware of. is that because they don't want to generate fear, they don't want to cause undue stress. You know, people ask me, do you think the government knows about them? Well, I'm not a conspiratorialist, and I don't believe they are necessarily hiding things from us. But there's a difference between hiding something, you know, intentionally hiding something versus admitting something. And I think in the case of the government, you know, it all comes down to consequence, right? Or probably better said, no consequence, because when you put it on a scale, if I were the government and I've got this scale and on this side, if I say something, if I bring this information that we have with regards to Bigfoot, in this case, to public attention, there are going to be consequences. There are going to be repercussions, and they really don't know. I'm sure they've probably uh, role played that out, the scenario, what could possibly go wrong here. But the bottom line is there would be some fairly severe consequences. Now, on this hand, I have a different button to push, and that's or a different choice to make, and that's to say nothing. And to say nothing comes with, you got it, zero consequences. So given those two choices, it's a lot easier to side on, hey, let's just say nothing and then not worry about the consequences until that time comes where they're not going to have a choice but to deal with it. So it's one of those taboo things that you know, it's that third rail of science that nobody wants to step on unless they absolutely have to. And I firmly believe that that's what's going on. There's too many civilians out there, you and me included, that know the truth. So to say that with all the scientists we have, and especially with the technology they have at their disposal, excuse me, that they're not aware of them. I think they are.